Hey guys, so if you didn't get enough sports streaming in your keynote today, welcome to the esports and sports streaming track, where we're going to continue the conversation. In fact, some of the people that you saw this morning are going to join us later on today. My name is Dreier. I'm a senior editor for Streaming Media Magazine, and I'm the organizer of the two-day track here. Really pleased with the people we've got. I'm going to also be moderating our first discussion of the day on live streaming in challenging conditions. And I'm really pleased with the four people that we've got joining us. We've got Peyote Perryman, the founder and creative director of Digital P Media. We have, on the far end, Ben Gabrielson, sales manager for sports for LiveU. Next to him, Grubbs, CEO of Lightstream. And over here, Jacob Potter, the assistant AD, what is that, acting director? Athletic director for broadcasting at the University of Oklahoma. Thank you guys for joining us. All of these four have an interesting story to tell, and I'm going to kind of guide them through their stories, but they're going to feel free to interject on each other's. And if you guys have questions as they go, feel free to raise your hand, and we'll just make this interactive. So the first story I want to call attention to, well, first thing I'd like to say something important about branding. I think we all know that branding is important for any operation. You have to create something memorable. In the months ahead, years ahead, you may come across some live streaming challenge you might need the company to go to, and one name is going to pop into your head, and that name is Peyote Perryman, because his parents understood the power of branding. Peyote was the first person I booked for this conference, literally, because his name is Peyote Perryman, and he was the first person I thought of. And he has an amazing story to tell about live streaming in challenging conditions. So you do a lot of live streaming with fishing in remote lakes. Could you tell us about that?
Sure, absolutely. And yeah, with a name like Peyote, there was a couple of options. An accountant and lawyer were not the options for me going forward. I decided early on that creative video is some way to channel my inner geek with a little bit of creative was the way to go. So we, our company, started working with an organization, Fishing League Worldwide, about 10 years ago to produce a television show around professional bass fishing. And that's not a new thing. It's been going on for 25 plus years. And as we were producing these shows for NBC Sports, and as we kind of got more into taking all this footage, and every time we'd come back from the event, we'd have all this footage and we'd boil it down to a 1-hour TV show, we kept thinking to ourselves, there's got to be a way to do this live, to really tell this story for these guys over the course of the entire day. So starting in 2014, we started looking at different technologies, different ways that we could take the existing camera infrastructure we're already out there on the water with and turn those into basically a live source back to a studio. And we talked about bringing it lakeside, with a truck versus having a what's called a REMI, or kind of a centralized operation, which a lot of sports productions had kind of started doing around 2014 and 2015. And so that's kind of ultimately what we did. That probably is a really simple way of saying something that is actually fairly complex, because we have 5 cameras, we have 25 iPads, we have 30 GoPros, we have a drone, we have a remote camera that wanders on the shore, and we're bringing all those sources back in through a cloud encoding service, and then converting those to NDI signals, and then creating a live broadcast that looks and feels like for the most part, like a regular, like a golf broadcast of a fishing show that happens on lakes anywhere in the country.
So set the scene. How vast is the area that you need to cover for sport fishing?
So these guys will take off on a lake. Typically, the lakes are 50 to 75 miles long, so like a lake like Kentucky Lake. And they'll start at one end of the lake, but then they want to go 70 miles in one direction. Lake Champlain's another good one. It's a huge lake. And the northern border to that lake is Canada. So if they choose to go that way, we're in international waters at that point. And so we've got guys. Our 30 anglers, we pick up on the weekends when it's 30 anglers, and then it cuts to 10 our coverage gets a little bit easier as it narrows down. But so we're looking at trying to follow them wherever they go. And so we've got a chase boat, and these boats drive at about 70, 75 miles an hour. And these guys are really, they have 8 hours of fishing time, so they are going to race to their spot. They're going to take advantage of every last second of time. And so we have to be ready to go live the moment they stop their boat, the moment they start fishing. Our camera has to be up and running, and then our drone is chasing, kind of follows the blast off in the morning, and then we start bringing that drone shot in, and it kind of gets mesmerizing, because you don't realize that how far apart they are. They're all over the lake, and we're just like, and now over here, and then we'll do like a little map, and we'll be like, okay, now over to this guy who's 50 miles away, doing a totally different technique, and then our crew is bringing back the fish catches, and we've got replay systems so that we can, if we miss a fish catch, we've got a way to bring it back and show people what happened. But we try to keep it as much of a live experience, as much of an in-the-moment experience, because what we found is that the important thing that we can do in a live stream is to create a really positive fan experience, so that they walk away from it going, I felt like I was there when it happened. That's what live offers you, a chance to be like, I was there when he figured out where those fish were, and it all happened for him. So we try not to rely on our replays as much as we try to be ahead of the game. So if a guy gets to a good area, we want to get there quick. So.
And at the beginning of the contest, how many fishermen are there? Fisher people?
It starts at 175 boats for the first 2 days, and then it cuts down to 30, and then it cuts down to 10, and then the winner wins $125,000. Professional bass fishing has been on ESPN, on NBC. Currently, you can see a lot of it on the Outdoor Channel, World Fishing Network, and then Discovery has started to pick up some professional bass fishing with Major League Fishing, which is our partner now. We actually just partnered with Major League Fishing as well.
And how do you even decide how to cover that many people over such a vast area? What goes into the planning?
You have to have a lot of knowledge of the sport, and I think that's true for any sports producer. Is that you have to immerse yourself in the really details of what makes someone good at what they do. And fishing, it might seem like it's kind of random, but these guys are actually really, really good at what they do. And so on different bodies of water, different fishermen have a strength that might lead you to say, well, I want to get a camera on that guy because I think he's going to have this lake figured out. And so, again, I've been involved in professional bass fishing for almost 20 years. My company's been producing it for them for the last 10 years. That's one thing that I have, is that ability to, I can say, oh yeah, this is the guy that we need to get the camera with, because chances are he's going to be doing pretty well. After they kind of start sorting themselves out on the leaderboard, it's a little bit easier, because whoever's the leader, it's a cumulative weight competition, so the weights carry over. So now you're like, I can really focus on the top of the leaderboard. But then that's where for us is where the iPads come in. So we have a marshal in every boat, and they all have an iPad. And so if a guy catches a fish, the marshal takes that, and then he texts it to the social media manager, who then texts it to me, and then I put it into a replay server, and then we can say, hey, here's a catch that just happened a couple of minutes ago, and this guy might be climbing up the leaderboard, and if he starts to really move up, then we will use one of our chase boats and move a big camera on him so we can be live. Again, the idea is to be there and kind of catch the rest of his day, because if it's happening, we want to be there.
And you're at the side of the lake with a big production desk right there on the shore?
No, we're in a studio in a little town of Benton, Kentucky, outside of Paducah, and we've got about like 8 people in our control room, and then 2 play-by-play and a color analyst, and then I'm in their ear. I'm telling the replay people what to call up, and then I'm talking to the 5 camera operators, the field producer, and the drone operator via a Discord app. And then
Discord is what you use for
our two-way comms, yeah.
And that's not what it was built for, was it?
No, it's a gaming app for gamers, but it's really it doesn't drain the battery on the phones out there on the water. Like we tried conference calls, so everyone would dial in, and everyone's phone was draining. And then we also found that the service wasn't always great. So someone would be, out in the middle of nowhere, and they couldn't dial into the call. Using the Discord app, we go through our bonded cellular unit, so they can just connect Wi-Fi to that, open up the Discord app, and then we're on. And then I can mute them. So if they leave their mic on, I can mute them. They can hit a call button on there, actually. So it works really well.
And what's the technology you use to transmit the video?
That is bonded cellular. The company is PepLink or PepWave. I can't remember because the company's one and the product is another. But that's basically inside a JVC shell that has high dB gain antennas on it, and then that sits somewhere on the boat. And then the JVC cameras that we use are the HM890s, and then those have wireless streaming encoders built in, so you can connect basically like a little USB nub, connect to the hotspot, and then Zixi is the stream, the cloud encoder that we bring that to the studio in Kentucky. So it's a server at Kentucky and we can actually do we have 30 iPads that can also push through Zixi. But for the most part, we just typically use our 5 big cameras and then let those other guys just send us stuff.
I don't think the Super Bowl has this big an operation for what you do for.
It's when we explain it to other production companies, they're like we were kind of we were trying to figure this out because not a lot of other production companies had this exact kind of challenge. And they're like, well, you can't do all that. But what we feel like is that any source that we can bring in that helps us tell that story faster and more live. And we've gotten more live as we used to only be able to send drone clips, but now we can have the live drone. We actually use a Teradek, and we're using the smart controller with the HDMI out from DJI so we can get a clean feed into the Teradek, and then now we have a nice, clean, we were using straight RMTP out of the drone, but we found that was, the bit rate on that was so strong that it would hiccup. And so it'd be a beautiful picture that would stop every 3 seconds.
Did everybody know that sports fishing was this huge? Because I was completely blown away, we have a sizzle reel here that might kind of show what you're up to here, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I call it a sizzle because it's fishing, but it's and this is really just an excerpt of like kind of how the show starts. So you get a sense of the live shot, the host, the leaderboard, and then into the first guy fishing.
Okay.
It's hard to get a 1-minute excerpt of a 6-hour day.
Which one is it?
The Perryman.
Oh, sorry, yeah, Perryman. No.
Day 2, and the anglers are out on the water on Lake Hamilton in Hot Springs, Arkansas for the biggest tournament in bass fishing. That's the FLW Cup. Todd, I'm excited about this, man. I think we're going to see some good fishing.
Let's go.
Yes.
Let's see what's happening already this morning out on Hamilton.
All right, we're going to head out there, but first, let's take a look at the leaderboard. Already some guys catching fish. No surprise. Brian Thrift has got one in the well. Yeah, Todd, it was interesting talking to these guys yesterday about trying to get their limits early of just small fish. Because we did see a lot of small fish, small little limits first thing in the morning. And then it made sense once we talked to the anglers. They were like, hey, I have this spot. I know it's going to be a grind, and I feel better just looking for one fish at a time if I have 5 little tiny fish in the live well. So at least I know I'm not going to blank or come in without a limit. And now Nick LeBrun started the morning in second place. Weighed in 15 pounds yesterday.
All right, so I haven't got a fishing boat yet this morning. I think they're going to bite a little bit later today. But one of the key things I've been doing is trying to get in position on some of these docks and make a cast that maybe nobody's made this week.
Nice, thank you. So at the end, how many viewers do you have for a live stream?
So we stream across flwfishing.com. We multicast to YouTube, to Facebook, to Twitch, and we average anywhere from 30 to 45,000 viewers a day. On an event that spikes a lot of interest like this one, we were closer to 90. So, we find we have a lot of viewers that are all over the world. They really enjoy it. One of the things I wanted to show was that leaderboard, because that's data that comes to us from these marshals that are updating a Google Doc. There's one guy on the shore who updates a Google Doc that we then bring in to our TriCaster through live text as a data feed, so that we can update these, because again, people, like they kind of have this expectation of a sport that they're watching, that they want to get all this information. And so we had to like come up with all these different ways to bring that information from the middle of nowhere. So we're very dependent on text. It's a very text heavy operation.
Well, I'm going to have to turn now to one of our other panelists. I want to talk to Ben with LiveU. Now, of course, you're with a vendor company that makes all this amazing transmission possible, but you also work with some streaming partners directly, right? You've been doing some work with at the Ivy Leagues, right?
Yep. Yeah. So just kind of like you said, we're very much involved in this process, but we get to kind of sit back and see all the cool stuff that everybody does with it. So yeah, I specifically work in the kind of college university ranks within LiveU. So we work with a lot of schools, Oklahoma being one, a lot of the Power Fives, but specifically kind of the Ivy Leagues is what we'll kind of talk about a little bit today, and the way they utilize it. They've done everything from the Olympic sports are so big at that kind of level in collegiate athletics that the skiing, rowing. Last week I was actually just in Tempe, Arizona for Arizona State doing the national championships for collegiate, the triathlon, which was really cool. We kind of they had 4 packs around the track or the course, if you will, on a boat following them as they swam, and then on motorists as they ran, and it was just a really cool production. And that was the first time I've actually seen something like that streamed or broadcast live, at least using LiveU. So, yeah, we talked about the rowing side of things. That's what I would say the sport that is used the most in the college ranks, from kind of start to finish. Golf, obviously a big one. Jacob and his crew does a great job with that. But yeah, on the rowing side, they'll have a drone going, kind of a similar setup to Peyote a little bit, with drones. They've got some cams on the boats, on the finish line, so they've kind of got them sporadically tossed around there as well.
So like when you're doing Harvard rowing, what does the full setup look like? I mean, where are the cameras, and how many operators do you have?
So they have 4. They do 4 packs. One is on the drone itself, one on the boat, one at the finish line, and then I think one at the very start of the race. They actually have a really cool setup, because they too kind of do the at-home or Remy production type style, where all of their directors and producers and graphics and all that is actually back on campus. I think the lake is maybe 10, 15 miles away from campus in their situation. But so they'll bring it all back to campus. They'll do obviously dirty it up there. They actually have a really cool kind of alumni boat house, I think, on site as well. So they bring it back, produce it, stream it out to ESPN Plus, but then they also then will send that feed back to the boathouse for those that are viewing, the alumni that are on site, kind of watching and tracking the race as well. So they not only stream it out live to someone like an ESPN, but they also kind of bring it again back in-house for those to kind of see the production as well that are there.
For something like this, is latency crucial as it is for like the major league sports?
Yes and no. I mean, it depends. Is in this specific case not as much. I mean, especially that program that's going out to ESPN Plus. There's only so few of people that are actually on site for that event, so there's no real social media probably spoilers in that case. So they can bump that latency up to 10, 15 seconds. But we've seen a couple of schools that will go in the 1 to 3 second range, and obviously that puts a little bit more onus on the in our case the cell modems, obviously, that are kind of bonding together. But yeah, you can go anywhere from sub-second to 20 seconds. Usually they'll live about the 10 to 12 second range in that case.
Mm-hmm. And so you also mentioned that you were at the Collegiate National Championships for triathlon. It's a
Yeah.
huge footprint.
Yes, very.
What does the setup look like for that?
Yeah, so like I said, they kind of had they had a pack actually that the guy physically ran with the runners at the start because it was just a small little kind of launch dock, if you will, into the water. So they had kind of a pack that literally ran with the runners into the water, jumped into a boat, and kind of was right on top of the swimmers as they were making their way down. They went to the one side of the lake and then back, which I think was, I don't know actually how many miles that swim ended up being, but once they got off there, they hopped on they had two packs actually, or two backpack camera guys waiting on a motorist that drove them with the bikers as they biked their way through the town of Tempe, came back, did their run. I mean, honestly, I was exhausted just watching it, but we had a couple of guys following the runners as well, and then they had one at the finish line to catch kind of obviously them finishing, but also interviews and stuff with the athletes afterwards. So they had 4 going that were just kind of continuously staying ahead of the pack, if you will.
And LiveU offers some kind of priority service that you can turn on when transmission is super critical?
Yeah. I mean, I think the whole, not even LiveU, but the whole technology of cell bonding and that allows a lot of this to happen, these types of kind of streaming in challenging conditions. I mean, that technology as a whole has grown so much. I mean, we've got HEVC now, which was a huge step in just making the stream and encoding a lot more efficient. Like you said, we've now kind of partnered with AT&T on that end to do what they call a QoS, or a priority SIM. So that SIM card won't necessarily bump people off the network, but will bring you to the front of the line on their specific network in the areas. So we've seen, on the university side, people go live within their sold out, 100,000 people stadium, go in sub 1 second to their video board, for instance. We've got this whole kind of rowing and triathlon type thing where you don't necessarily have to worry as much, right, about, because you're pulling from the Verizons, the AT&Ts, the T-Mobile. You're pulling from all these different carriers, plus you've got now this kind of priority SIM that kind of puts you ahead of everybody else in that region. So as a whole, that type of technology has just taken off so much in the last couple of years, even to where the challenge is still there, but it's very obtainable now.
Something unfair about that, having this unfair advantage in
Yeah.
the sports competition.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
little-
We're
little
kind of
signal
the
booster.
like steroids of, streaming, I guess.
Now, Peyote told me about what he uses for communications, but you've got your own built-in communications tool.
We do, yeah. That was actually kind of another technology, I guess, or the progress we're making on the technology side is making it a lot more of a professional REMI or at-home type production, right?
Can you explain REMI?
Basically a remote production.
Remote production,
Yes,
okay.
sorry. So if you've got cameramen on site, like I said, 10, 15, whatever, even another state away from where you want to bring everything back to, you have your kind of your central location, your central control room where you're producing it, probably, hard lined in, NDI all the way around type of setup where when you're actually pushing that stream out to your end destination, you've got plenty of bandwidth, you've got everybody in one room, you're nice and cozy kind of thing, but everybody else is wherever the event is, essentially sending it that back. So yeah, and like you said, the two-way comms is now kind of a new thing that we're doing. Tally light. So we're just trying to make it a little. We're adding into that and leaning into that a lot to make it and allowing people to go kind of as high as they want to go, quality-wise, and with that type of REMI workflow.
And you've also brought a reel, right?
Yes.
Explain to us what we're going to see in just a second here.
That's a great question. I did not load it in there.
not put
No,
together
it's Harvard rowing. I think it was their regatta last year that they did against Yale, which is their Harvard Yale kind of thing. So I believe this is just kind of a preview or a breakdown of that event that they did from it. So you'll see drone shots.
Got some explosive music.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Essential.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Over going whirly bird, tantrum overhead.
That was very action-packed. Well, the one thing that I will kind of go along with that too is, and what Peyote mentioned is like, we've seen a lot of people use it a lot more even for like fan engagement. You saw kind of a shot of like Notre Dame's band, like they went to the Cotton Bowl last year and took a pack on the road and, you know, did their band performances live, did like the first 15 minutes of practice onto Facebook. So, I mean, especially in the college ranks, as I see, I mean, you've got a audience that really wants to be part of that pageantry, and that type of ancillary content is very valuable to them. So being able to take that and do just kind of quick hitters as well, you know, it doesn't have to be a full-blown, you know, production out on the water type thing. So that kind of stuff has been really cool to see.
Okay, now Stu, with Lightstream, you're a representative from the gaming world here. So explain to us what Lightstream is and what kind of setups you're working with in your own challenges.
I didn't realize I was representing all my people.
Yes, you are the gamer.
I've been in esports and gaming for about 15 years, since about 2005. My first team I was a part of was called Got Frag and sold to Major League Gaming, was part of that for a long time. And back then we were doing streaming of esports events when it was 50 kids in a basement, not the billion-dollar industry it was, is becoming, using like Brightco's packet shapers to, if you wanted to be a viewer of the stream. But which is where I kind of got my love for streaming content. Esports was not on television. We were not. We were the dwellers, competing for very small amounts of money in hotel lobby, convention center kind of things. And so our only outlet to share that with people who were not able to attend the event was via a bunch of weird streaming services back in the early days that weren't. And then finally, Justin TV came around. And then finally they realized we were their future and turned into Twitch, which was really cool to see. And so along the way, you know, I worked at a couple of different places, but ultimately ended up founding Lightstream about 5 years ago with some friends of mine. And what Lightstream is an entirely cloud-native live video production studio and architecture. So it is essentially on one end a browser-based production studio where you can go in, drag and drop, go live. You don't need to understand everything that everyone in this room understands about how to make video on the internet to start creating content. But then we make that entire architecture available via an API so that advanced producers, other companies like LiveU can extend their platform with our cloud compositing services. I think that's the big difference between us and other things, is that we don't simply route video we receive, you're actually able to manipulate that in the cloud, and instead of bringing it back down to make any changes that you might need. So I can stop there for any questions, but I have some examples of how that gets used too.
Yeah, and I understand one of your examples is outside the sports world, right? You've done a lot with music production.
Yeah, a little bit. In Chicago, we had a couple music venues approach us thinking we were a production company, not a software and technology company. But I thought the problem set was interesting, and so I offered to do it in my spare time. And so what we ended up doing was setting up live streaming for some of these venues where they would live stream the opening acts of an event that evening, and in an attempt to stream that to Facebook to see, on their page for the venue, say, hey, this is what's happening tonight. Here's a little taster of what's going on. And then they would say, hey, the stream's going to cut off at 9 p.m. If you want to see the headliners, you should make your way into the venue. The first time we did that, we went in. The venue made all sorts of promises. And as soon as we went live, people couldn't process credit cards faster than 4 or 5 minutes. Turns out they had the entire POS system on the same network that we were live streaming on. So we literally brought down the house. So that was when I threw up my phone as our first cellular streaming experience. Was me throwing up a hotspot and blowing through my data plan. We had it was a full. I think it was a really simple setup, to be honest with you. Like what we do, Lightstream in general, we work with thousands of creators that are working on an individual basis. These are people streaming with a backpack. Everybody else up here does far more advanced and higher production levels. What we're trying to do is make it accessible for the individual creator that's doing this, for a number of different reasons. And so in kind, my own setup was very simple for this. It was a very simple Canon camera with an XLR input off the soundboard, and I hooked that up through an Elgato Cam Link into a small laptop that I had there. And I think at that time I decided to run OBS. because we thought we should just do it all local. So what we ended up doing, and where this advanced was, that first night I used my own phone as the hotspot, and that did not work out well for my bills. But the next time was when I was introduced to some friends over at LiveU, and we ended up building what we are today. So up and out of the venue it was really the main goal on premise. How do we get this camera feed and the sound at a high quality level out of this challenging environment and into the cloud? And then somebody, even me via my phone, but I had somebody back at home, one of my co-founders. I was able to log into our stuff, see my feed, add on all the alerts, overlays, and things that you would want to add. But he wasn't bringing my video feed down. He was sending those instructions into our cloud video engines where those were composited on and then switching scenes. One of the benefits of what we've built is that I would lose signal from time to time just because if any of you have ever been to Chicago, most of the venues are these really old buildings that even the cellular bonding has a hard time getting through. But when I would go down, we actually our cloud video engines actually keep the stream live, waiting for a reconnection from me. And so we were able to actually produce, but our number one goal is always, especially for individual creators. I think you guys, I don't know if you've met Das Valdez. Yeah, so Das uses our stuff from time to time. He does this thing called Space Kerbal Academy, where he does live streams of a lot of the rocket launches. And he's live on site, and he's it's almost an educational stream on Twitch, if that makes sense. And so he's doing tours all around the venue, and we were working with him on the USS Midway, and he wandered inside of the ship, and of course, as a big steel ship does, cut up all signal. But his stream was able to stay live, still communicate to his audience, didn't go away, the channel didn't go down, and as soon as he walked back out of the ship, there was Das again re-explaining it. And so that's, but yeah, as small streamers, our number one goal is get the video, get the content up and out of wherever you are that's challenging, and try to keep the production in the cloud, and don't bring it down again.
And going back to esports, you recently did a big event called Gamers for Giving. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so for the last 4 years, we've sponsored a charity LAN event out of Michigan, Eastern Michigan University. Basically, the charity itself produces these things they call go-karts. Gamers Outreach is the name of the charity, but they are essentially gaming carts that can be wheeled into kids' hospital rooms that have to spend an inordinate and an appropriate amount of time of their childhood in the hospital. This can range from anything from Crohn's disease to terminally ill patients. So we've sponsored what is called the Streaming Zone. This is actually a good example of esports and gaming and the impact they've had on a nonprofit scale. But it's the largest LAN party. If you don't know what a LAN party is, a LAN party is 500 gamers getting together in a room, networking all their PCs and playing games for 48 hours. So they all pay for slots there. That money goes to the charity. So this is an Eastern Michigan University stadium where they've set up just tons of folding tables, and at this time it's a really highly produced event, when I mean physically. But there's a streamer zone where we bring in streamers that are really popular on Twitch from all kinds of different categories, and they spend the weekend streaming to their audiences, asking for donations. Think of like the old call, the phonathon, telethon. Thank you. But this is streamers doing it, so we've sponsored that area for years. But if you can imagine 500 gamers all downloading their favorite game because they're now going to play that instead of that. On top of that, we've run into a number of challenging conditions with we live stream the whole thing. So we've got 25 streamers all streaming to their audiences from inside that zone. We're also producing a full stream of the event itself, which is interviewing the different brands that come in, like us and a number of other people that are involved. And the number of times that the whole network just, we bring down like half the university's internet just over that weekend. And so we've full on switched to doing interviews. We've had streamers pop up, pull out their phone and start streaming to their channel because their PC went down. PC's network went down, but their phone still worked, and so they got back up and kept raising money while streaming from their mobile phone. We've used LiveU to do interviews around the stadium, but yeah, I mean that's I think in one weekend we'll raise like $1 million for Gamers Outreach. But yeah, one of the more challenging conditions having everybody aggressively stealing your network, because that's the whole point of the event. But
That sounds like an awesome event. Really, must be fun to be a part of it.
yeah, definitely.
That's awesome. So I'm going to turn to our final panelist here, Jacob with University of Oklahoma. Jacob, thank you for waiting here. And you've been using cellular bonding for about 7 years, I understand, and you've been focusing on golf.
Golf is one of our big challenges that we kind of hang our hat on, that we're able to actually execute it. It's not common for college networks to produce that because it's such a large animal, such a big thing to try to tackle. You basically have a very large space, similar to doing fishing, but there's not as much water. So the point is to stay out of the water in golf. But basically, we have an at-home control room, like you've been hearing a lot of these people talk about. So our challenge is to get those camera signals to our control room, because it's not feasible for us to unrack all of our equipment and take it to the golf course. But with golf, you have so many cameras, the distances are so far. We thought the only option was to rent enough cellular bond packs at every camera location. But whenever we started to develop this idea, and as we've gone on over the years, what we've actually ended up doing is doing line cuts from each hole. So what that allows us to do is to cable each camera back to the green or to the tee box, whatever makes the most sense, into a very small switcher that's about the size of an iPad. And we're switching the camera feeds on site and then taking that SDI out into our LiveU pack and sending that back to our centralized control room. So the control room back at our football stadium, actually in Oklahoma, we have all these feeds coming in, and we're able to go to that hole, and we don't even have to worry about taking a certain camera. That cut is already coming to us as the correct tee shot, then green, back to tee, what have you. So that actually allowed us to do a 11 camera broadcast with just 4 LiveU backpacks. So in the end, we were able to execute this, and I was able to look at our administration and say, hey, we didn't even have to spend any extra money to do this because we already used what we had in-house and just what we had laying around. So there's a little bit of a different way to look at this technology, and a way to utilize it is really as a tool to transmit not just a single feed, but multiple feeds at any given time.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize this because I found this so interesting, your efficiency that you've developed here. So you have 4 units that you have in-house.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you have this large event that you thought you would need like 10, right? And how did you make the 4 do the work of 10?
Each hole has multiple cameras, and so say a par 3 would have 3 cameras. We'd have 1 on the tee box and 2 on the green to do tight shots, wide shots of the green, whatever it might be. So those 3 cameras would be mixed down to 1 LiveU stream. So however many holes, in the par 5 might have more cameras, but regardless, it's still coming down to 1 switch stream in the end. Same concept we've applied to things like the pregame shows. Ben mentioned football stadiums having 100,000 plus people in there, so being able to get a good connection isn't necessarily reliable, but we often can order an Ethernet drop on the field from the stadiums, but that's only 1 drop. And so we utilize the same concept. We're taking our cameras that are there on site, mixing them before we feed into that transmission signal to send it back, so that we're able to get what we want to accomplish via the means that we have, which in those cases would be just a single Ethernet drop.
And who's doing that live mixing at the spot?
Whoever's sitting there. Last Saturday was me, so I happened to be the closest one, so I did that. And if we show the video, you'll actually kind of see these 2 examples in action. So first part of the video, it's only 20 seconds, I think, so it's not going to take much of your time. But the first part is just the end result of what the golf broadcast looked like. And then the final few shots are the pregame show from last Saturday, from just a few days ago. It's more of a work in progress type of look. So a little bit crude camera work there, but knowing I was going to come here and speak with everybody, just pulled up my phone to kind of shoot what we were doing there. So good example of kind of how we're pulling that off.
That looked fantastic.
The quality is amazing. Yeah, we bring it back, add on the graphics, whatever we need to do, sponsors, all that good stuff.
And how much of the production crew are students learning this? Sort of like that's their major or what?
At the University of Oklahoma, we do about 120 live game broadcast a year and about 150 studio shows. Any given crew call list will have about 85 to 90% students. So we do a lot of training. We usually just have some key full-timers in place to be able to put out fires or train, make decisions if something's gone wrong or something fails. We can tackle that. One thing I wanted to hit on before we move on is one thing we've learned is latency is obviously going to make everybody's lives easier the less that it gets, but there's also opportunities to embrace that delay and to use it to your advantage. So for our pregame shows, we're on a 20-second delay to account for the cell phone signal and things like that. So we actually are talking via cell phone through the IP of the announcer's ear, but that allows the producer back in Norman to be able to anticipate whenever the announcer is going to said topic. So if he's changed topics to talk about the defense or a certain running back, we actually have 20 seconds of lead time to get that graphic ready, get that video pulled up in our replay machine, whatever it might be. We kind of looked at the delay at first. You think it's a detriment, but we actually decided, hey, let's embrace it and figure out a way to make it a positive, and it's been good for us.
I think that's one of the best lessons out of this whole panel is how to embrace latency to make your production even better.
You might as well. You can't fight it, so.
So you don't even want sub-second latency.
I will take it, but no, it's been really good. So it actually, especially for a crew that's full of students, it helps to minimize some of those mistakes that I talked about. For something that's not critical live, like a sporting event might need to be. Pre-game show, it's okay if it's 20 seconds behind. Nobody's going to notice that, so that's fine.
And how are you? What's the streaming technology you're using for your remote productions?
We use LiveU as well.
You use LiveU. And then how do your fans, how do your alumni, whoever is watching, how do they see your action?
Most of our stuff is actually linear. So we have a relationship with Fox Sports Southwest, and a lot of our content is consumed that way, but everything we do is streamed via their official apps. And if we have another event, a special game, we do a charity Halloween baseball game where the baseball players and softball players wear costumes and they play baseball and dressed up as Woody and Buzz. So we'll stream that online, what have you, something that linear doesn't necessarily want, but allows us to connect with fans and do fundraising while it goes on. So we don't have to take commercial breaks, so we can be on air for an hour, hour and a half, whatever it might be, and we continue to do fundraising. They do, dollars for dingers or whatever it is. Every time they get a home run, donate some more, whatever it might be.
Very cool. We got a couple minutes left, and I bet some of you have some questions out there. Who would like to hit us with a question for one of our panelists? I guess you guys did. You guys have questions for each other? Oh, we have one.
So, question about the fishing. So, how often do you have these kind of battles of like, no, it's a great lake for fishing. No, it's a great lake for data. And like, how do you make those decisions with the actual fishermen and all that?
So we've been doing it for long enough to know when we have a lake that has a challenge. At this point, and we still give the fishermen the complete run of the lake, knowing that we're going to have like a dead spot. And so basically, if you ever look at a lake and you see a national wildlife refuge, there's no cell service around a national wildlife refuge. And so we kind of will say, okay, well, we know if a guy is going to be in the lead there, we will run footage back. So the chase boat will bring a card with some footage, and then the field producer on site, he loads that into OBS and feeds it straight to us. So now but that's basically, we know that there's bad lakes out there or bad spots on lakes, but right at this point we have not limited our lakes based on that. We still try to let these guys have like the best field of play they can possibly have. Our partner, Major League Fishing, they will set up off limits areas. So when they go and scan they'll scan the lake beforehand. And then so if they know that there's a national wildlife use, they'll just say, well, that area is off limits. And I think probably going ahead in the future, we'll start doing that as well, because as much as it's useful to bring that footage in, it's really good to see it live.
And are you putting marshals in all 135 boats at the top, or just people that you know are just
No, the Marshall program has 170 guys going. So every angler the first 2 days has a marshal in his boat, and these marshals pay to be on the boat, and then they're texting the updates so that we have our live leaderboard. But then they actually get to enter a prize package kind of thing. So like if the guy that they're, depending on the weight that guy catches that day, where he finishes in the leaderboard, a marshal can win up to $2,500.
Oh, I thought you meant Marshall cameras, the little POV.
Oh, no. I'm talking about like literally like a judge. Yeah. The judge, but I mean, they've got, and then the 30 of them have iPads. And so those marshals on the last 2 days are the ones that send us clips.
You're gonna have to explain to me later how a chase boat doesn't scare the fish, because my dad told me not to even move around the boat. I don't know. Sorry. I'm sorry, I had one more in the back before, that was first. I saw one other hand. All right, go ahead.
Just for the people who are doing Remy, I'm curious, are all of your commentators play-by-play back home, or are they on site? Or do you have any sideline reporters that are reporting back, and how are you dealing with your delays?
For us personally, we vary by sport. So if the wrestling, for example, isn't going to move, it stays within a 50-foot area. Tennis, our facility is set up to where half of the courts are on one side and half of the courts on the other side of the building. So there's no vantage point for a announcer to see it all at once. So we put those back in a central studio. So we just kind of vary it by what the arena sets up for us in that aspect. That they aren't happy with it, though. All announcers want to be on site for sure.
Over here, Remy, question?
We've talked about in esports because it's usually a multilingual sport, almost every single one of them. So what they do is they'll have on site for at least the North American events, we'll have on site casters in the English language. You take a raw feed of the action out of the venue. And in Brazil, we have 2 casters that know the game well and can cast it, and so they'll perform commentary over top of the action that they're getting. And they won't see all the action like the on-site will with every player's point of view, but they will get a raw feed of the event footage, and so you'll end up with like 5 or 6 broadcasts in multiple languages, and that gets essentially it's a mix and match kind of thing. So
Ben, what do the Ivies usually do?
Yeah, they will actually have a lot of them more back at the studio, but like Jacob said, I think it's just the sport that calls for it. So,
And then I can throw in one more thing. We do have a guy on the lake, and we use Skype, and so we're Skyping him in, and so he can report, and we'll do a split screen, and that's our basic our two-way conversation, and then everything else is on the delay. But when they're talking to the reporter so they're back at the Remy, but reporter can say, this is exactly what I saw, and they can have a good conversation. And you put a light and a good iPad outdoors, it looks pretty good.
Well, I'm sorry I couldn't get to more questions, but please approach our panelists after. And a big round of applause for these 4 excellent guys.